Today we're continuing on with our NHL offseason review series. We're still in the Atlantic Division teams, and we're reviewing today the Toronto Maple Leafs. What moves have they made this offseason? Who's left? Who's come in? Are they a better team, worse team? Or where do things stand with their remaining business to be looked at here this offseason? We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned today, we're continuing on with our offseason review series, and we're looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, this is the third to last team in the Atlantic Division to be reviewed. We still have two teams in Florida to do next, so stay tuned for those coming here in the next couple days. But the Maple Leafs are a pretty interesting team to watch here after another disappointing playoff failure. What have they done to really change things up and get ready for next year? So first up, we're going to take a look at what their offseason objectives were, who's come into the organization, who's left, and kind of discuss anything that's remaining for them this offseason, and have they made the right moves to improve, or where do things stand with that going into the regular season and training camp. So first up, their objectives were for a couple things here. One is they certainly ended the season on a not a good note, a playoff failure here again, and they acknowledge the fact that they need some more grit, determination, and that push to win here at the end of the day. That they were just seemed like killer instincts, what they called it. So they needed to add some pieces to better reflect that. And certainly another big one to me was the goaltending. We knew that there was a good chance that Freddie Andersen was leaving. We knew that Jack Campbell's done well for them as of late, but he's yet to really show what he's done in an 82-game season. So they needed another goaltender to work with him, and that was going to be a big piece here as well. So let's now take a look at the signings and trades, departures, to see if they've accomplished what they set out to do here going into the offseason. Now, as far as trades go, it's been fairly quiet. We did see them make one trade ahead of expansion. They made a trade with the Penguins, acquiring Jared McCann for prospect Philip Hallander and a draft pick. They made that deal basically to have an extra body in there for expansion. And McCann was actually a player that was selected by the Kraken. They knew that the Kraken were interested in him because he was going to be exposed in Pittsburgh, or Alex Kerfoot, who was likely going to be exposed in Toronto. And they made it so that they could only get one, not both. And they essentially lost a prospect and a late-round pick to make that happen. So not a bad deal overall, but that's really all they've done when it comes to trade. But that trade helped them preserve the remaining pieces of their roster here. Now, as far as what other players have come in, well, they've made a lot of moves because they had a lot of expiring contracts, and just like the last few years, we've seen this. They have like their big money deals, and then every year they have short-term deals expiring that they have to round out their supporting cast. So once again, they've done that. So they brought in a couple of players from Boston, signing Nick Ritchie and Andre Kasha. Ritchie's likely going to get a top six role, or at least an opportunity to play a top six role. We'll see how he fits in. I'm going to suspect he probably could play either on the Matthews-Marner line and kind of be that new Zach Hyman, so to speak, or he could play with Tavares and Nylander. It's really difficult to say how their lineup's going to go there. I think there's a good chance Ritchie goes on the Tavares line, and that another newcomer who they brought in from Arizona on a terrific signing, Michael Bunting, I think he could play the role there and on the left side of Matthews and Marner. I mean, that's what I would probably start with to see how that goes, but we'll have to see what they have in mind. But Bunting's a guy that comes in from Arizona with a lot of speed, familiarity from his time in the Sioux with Dubas and Keefe. So again, another player that's linked there. No big surprise. And then like I said, they have Ritchie who can play that second line role. So those are your two top six forwards, which are not big names really at all. But we'll see what they can do. Andre Kasha hopefully can remain healthy. If he can, I mean, the guy can skate. He's a former 20-goal scorer. He could be a real third-line two-way player that could give them some offense. I mean, he didn't get very much of a contract, so it is low risk, but he's had so many issues with concussions. You can't help but wonder, one more and he's probably done, right? I mean, but still, a low-risk signing in that regard. They've also brought in some other players here as well. They signed goaltender Peter Mrazek. Mrazek will play with Campbell in probably a 1A, 1B situation, but certainly a situation where he doesn't have to be playing a big role. Like, they could each split the games pretty evenly, would be my suspicions here and what they're going to do. But Like I said, Campbell's played well, but he needed a real strong partner, and Mrazek's got a lot of playoff experience in the last couple of years with the Hurricanes, so it should be a good addition. But is it going to be a better tandem than Anderson-Campbell? Only time will tell. I mean, some feel it is, some feel it isn't, and we'll have to see which side is right here once they have a chance to show what they're able to do. Now, they also brought in Curtis Gabriel, who could certainly give you some fist, I guess. You know, he's certainly known for dropping the gloves. Can play a physical style of game. So, obviously, that killer instinct, he can help you with that. Nick Ritchie should be able to help you with that a little bit, too. The thing with Ritchie is getting it out of him every night. And they also brought in David Kampf as well, who was another RFA not qualified by the Blackhawks, who they signed as a free agent, too. So, a variety of guys there that can play anywhere from your top 6 to your 3rd and 4th lines, and you get a goaltender in there as well, you know, and a bit of an enforcer guy with Gabriel. So overall, they really brought in quite a mixture of folks there in different roles heading into the season. Now, as far as who departed, who's gone, well, they got some big ones. Like these guys that we just talked about are not big names. You know, they're going to be guys on shorter term, smaller money contracts expected to fill some big shoes. Like Zach Hyman departs to Edmonton. That's a huge loss. I know many feel that his departure is going to have a major impact, and it could. I mean, the guys they brought in are not exactly the same kind of player as him. So, like, hard to say how that's going to go, really. But, you know, he's gone, and that could be a big loss. Freddie Anderson was their goalie for a long time. So, you know, Anderson's not there now, so it's going to be Mrazek. We'll see how that goes. But a couple of big names that have been there for a fairly substantial period of time. You get Jumbo Joe Thornton. Doesn't return, at least as of yet. He hasn't signed anywhere. There's been no talks about him in the Leafs, so I don't think he's going back. I mean, based on what they've signed here, it doesn't look like it. They brought in a lot of new faces. So hard to say what the future holds for Joe. And then you've also got guys that they brought in at the deadline. Nick Foligno left, went to Boston. You got Riley Nash has departed as well. David Riddick, Ben Hutton, all those guys they brought in, none of them are going to be returning. Alex Galchenyuk is another one. At this point, remains unsigned, but hasn't signed anywhere. There's been some word that the Leafs are still somewhat interested. The door's not closed, but considering all the other moves they've made and other players we just talked about, I don't know. I think there's not as good a chance now that he makes it coming back. So we'll see what happens to Galchenyuk. Now, just to add to the additions as well, I mean, they're not really new players, but they did re-sign Jason Spezza and Wayne Simmons. They both get new deals to remain the veteran guys here, and they're also bringing in Josh Hosang. He's not on a committed contract, though. He's coming into camp on a tryout, so we'll see how that works out for a PTO for Josh Hosang. Can he finally get his act together here and show some NHL skill and put the attitude stuff aside? Only time will tell. So at this point in his offseason, do the Maple Leafs still have some unfinished business? And I have to say that it's pretty likely that they do, but it's nothing real major. At this point, I would not be surprised if they sign another veteran defenseman to have as a depth number 7 guy. Can be a guy who can either compete for a third pair role, maybe be that extra guy, somebody who's kind of used to going up and down, going in and out of the lineup, that type of thing. Hard to say who that could be, but you're looking at their blue line, they're going to have to rely more on the youngsters, which is fine to an extent, but they should have an insurance piece there with a little bit more experience just in case. And you also have to look at what they brought in for the killer instinct side of it. You know, they did okay with that, like I said, with Gabriel, Ritchie. You know, hopefully Simmons can demonstrate that again this year. You know, that's kind of what they're looking for. I mean, Michael Bunting's a guy who does play pretty hard. I mean, he doesn't have much of a history in the NHL, so it's hard to say how that's going to go for him. I mean, he did have a really good, you know, shortened season in Arizona, so we'll see what he can show here. They are also really tight on cap space, too, so there is a chance they could still pull off a trade. Maybe it's for a draft pick. Maybe it's for that depth defenseman I'm talking about. But maybe a guy like Alex Kerfoot or Ilya Mikheyev, it's still possible a player like that with a little bit of cash on the books here that could be moved just to give them a little bit more cap flexibility heading into the offseason, heading into the next regular season here. I mean, it's not a guarantee they do that, but given their situation with the cap and what else they could use, it is a possibility that it is something that we could possibly see here as well. So with all that being said, are the Leafs a better team? Did they accomplish their objectives? Are they getting worse? Are they staying the same? What's their status here? And, for the most part, I'll say that they generally accomplished their goals. They brought in a goaltender that's not Freddie Anderson to work with. Campbell, they did bring in some players who kind of do show that killer instinct type of play. I'm a little bit surprised, though, to be honest, that they didn't make more wholesale changes, like something a little bit more substantial, but clearly they believe in this group. And it's one of those things that surprises me, but we'll see if they can get over the hump this year. But based on the divisions resetting, going back to the Atlantic Division, they're going to be doing battle with some tough teams in Florida, the Lightning and the Panthers. The Habs just went on a huge playoff run. They're going to be tough this year. You've got the Boston Bruins, the greatly improved Ottawa Senators, who always give the Leafs a hard time, regardless of where things are at with them. You get the Sabres and the Red Wings are likely going to be near the bottom. But, it's not going to be easy. And I'm not really sure, though, that we can say this team is better. I mean, if you look at the goaltending, it's based on how Anderson played before. I'm not really sure to say that Mrazek's an upgrade. And when it comes to the other players they brought in, especially to fill the forward holes, I don't know if we can say that they're better. Does anybody in that roster as good as Zach Hyman they brought in? It's debatable. I don't think that the answer is probably no. And are those younger D like Liljegren and Sandin ready to take another step here? Without another veteran presence to insulate them there, that could prove costly too. So to me, I don't think they're a better team. I'm not really sure that they're worse. I think maybe at best they're going to be about the same. And I think they're going to have to make some tweaks here as we go along as they get ready for the playoffs. Because to me, there's still some question marks with this group. And I think they've answered some questions. I just don't know if they're really better off to take that next step. And I think Dubas will be kind of working things here through the season and maybe make some additional deadline acquisitions here to kind of try to put this team over the hump. So we'll see what happens. But let me know what your thoughts are on the Leafs offseason. Have they accomplished their goals? Are they a better team? Are they staying about the same? Are they getting worse? What are your thoughts on the quietness and the lack of a bigger move out of Toronto this offseason? If you're new to this series, of course, stick around. There's plenty more videos coming. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We do keep you up to date with all the latest NHL trade rumors, news, signings, etc. on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.